Amen. All right, so if you are just joining us, what we're doing is kind of going through these house rules, these guidelines, the ones in black. I don't know that you can see those, but what we've talked about so far is home is a safe place, all people deserve respect, and actually we branched off of that and said all people deserve to be valued. We tell the truth. We spent like maybe 10 minutes on we speak with love because that's the one that's going to continue to kind of leak into all of these. So we hit that one real quick. So you'll see today we are going to talk about gossip, and I don't have any kind of an intro. I sat here, I did the whole lesson except for any kind of intro. I don't even know how to do it except to start with a question like this. So let me hear what you have to say as we start here, just to kind of get our brain working in the direction of gossip in the home, gossip outside of the home, gossip in the church, gossip amongst friends. Why are we so fascinated? And not necessarily with gossip. You see, I'm starting with drama. Why are we so fascinated and captivated with the going ons of everybody else's life? Go ahead.
It makes us feel better about ourselves.
Okay, makes us feel better about ourselves. There's like some relative goodness there, right? So if I can talk bad about Drew, even though he may or may not have done anything bad, but it makes me feel good as I talk about him and I compare myself to him, right? What else? Or why else?
It is easier to diagnose and they use the word fix in air quotes other people's problems than it is to fix our own.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a lot easier to talk about everyone else and to fix and diagnose their issues more so than ourselves. That's where the hard work is. It's easy out there. What else? Anything else? Anybody care to say we just like to do it, right? I mean, it's just, I mean, does anyone in here not like a big, fat, juicy story? Right? I mean, part of it is that it's entertaining, some of which will pop up in this lesson as we think about what we watch and what we hear and what we listen to. We are enthralled, we're captivated by people that talk about other people, right? But either way, that fascination with the drama of others can take a really dark turn when it's talking about people that are really close to us. Totally still bad, but totally different for me to talk about someone I don't personally know and talk about something they've done versus someone that's in my circle, someone that's close. So let's go here. What is gossip? I hope this can kind of be a working definition. You tell me if you have any problem with it. We can fix it and address it. But I want this to be kind of a working definition of gossip for this morning. So it's saying something bad, something negative about someone else in order that I move them down the chart a little bit. I ruin their reputation in such a way, or I condemn them, especially when they are not present. So I think that's the big part of what we're talking about. Totally different that I maybe, sorry, Drew, you're in the splash zone. I say something bad about Drew to his face, and we address it, we talk about it, versus him not being present. So the Bible, what's interesting as you look at gossip from a biblical perspective, the Bible uses all kinds of terms, all kinds of words, all these different layers of gossip. And so gossip is really more than anything else, kind of an umbrella term, right? And so I don't know, do you guys use any of these words? I mean, would you say that you use these words on the regular? Yeah, I mean, we don't typically call people busybodies or talebearers or meddlers, so we're going to talk some about that. And so I think that obviously we've started every class in talking about the dangers of some of these words and the danger of gossip. And this one is no different than all the others. But just so we're clear, what is the damage that's done through gossip? Is there damage done through gossip?
Yeah.
Okay, what kind of damage is done when I talk about other people and they are not present and it's not a face to face?
Breaks trust.
Okay. Have we talked about breaking trust with any of these others? Yeah, telling the truth, most especially. What else can it do or does it do?
People can't defend themselves.
Okay. Yeah, so when they can't defend themselves, then what?
Stories keep going and the
Yeah,
truth isn't exactly the truth. It could be muddled up a little bit.
sure. So that's where we get into the area of what we call a rumor, right? I mean, you fill in the blank and it just keeps going and going. Yes, ma'am.
Also, like, it could be, they would come back to hurt the person that we're talking about.
Okay.
Because when they find out, if you're their friend, they find out that you were talking about them, that's not going to be.
It's not going to be pretty. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that takes me back to middle school, right? I hear someone talking about me, it gets back to me, and then all of a sudden I'm not their friend anymore, right? Now, before we get into this whole thing, I think it's really important that we add a little bit of a disclaimer on this one as we have some of the others, and kind of talk about what we aren't saying. I know you have the definition. But let me ask you this. Sometimes do we need to talk about people? Sometimes is it appropriate to talk about people when they aren't present?
Yeah.
So what is the disclaimer part of that? Talk me through that. What is an instance when I need to, maybe Nick and I need to come together and we're talking about one of you, right? Amber?
When you're talking about, discussing somebody else when they're not present, you have to think to yourself, one, does this directly involve me? Like, should I even be inserting myself into this problem? And two, is the person that I'm talking to, if I'm bringing this story, rumor, gossip, whatever, if I'm bringing it to Wayne, am I assisting in hurting this person, or am I bringing him this tough story because I know Wayne can help this person?
There you go. So Donald, you about to say the same thing? Okay. So I heard the word help and I heard the word assist, right? And so those are key to me and someone else talking about someone else. So it takes us back, or should take us back to, okay, what is the motive behind me talking to Megan about one of you? We love talking about each other, but no, I'm kidding. Go ahead, Chris.
You just said it, motive,
Okay.
intent, the intent behind why it's being discussed.
Yeah, so is it to tear down? Is it, as we talked about last week, to remove a brick from the building that we're trying to build, or is it to build someone up? Is that the purpose as to why I'm doing it? Now, there's two passages that come to mind. I'm not going to read these, but Galatians 6, Matthew 18, you're probably familiar with both of these. But again, like as you look at this is a scenario where I'm in an exchange with someone else. I am talking about someone else without them being present. And what is the motive, or what is the intent behind these two passages? Mind you, that in both cases, someone has sinned against me, and I'm going out and I'm sharing that with someone else. In the first one, someone is caught in a transgression. They're caught in some kind of sin. So what is the motive that you see here? Is it not building up? It is not the purpose that I do that. Now, again, that's just a disclaimer piece that there are times over here where, sure, I need to talk to someone and it needs to be about someone else and they're not present. But what is the intent? We looked at this in Ephesians 4, verse 29. We're only talking about things that are of the interest of others in the sense that we're building them up. And so let me stop right there. Any comments so far? Anything you want to say? Hillary, Delia, and Drew? Is that okay? So Hillary?
Mom always said, growing up, she said, is it true Is it kind?
Mm-hmm.
Would you want it said about you?
Yeah.
And would you say it if they were sitting here?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I couldn't answer
Yeah.
yes to all.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that piece, a little bit of it at the end when we talk about building an anti-gossip home. Like, what does it look like? What can we do? Delia?
Going back to helping somebody, if you're trying to help somebody, is it the story of you to tell? You have to talk to the person before you share the story. You're trying to help that person, but maybe that person doesn't want their story shared with anybody else.
Right. Yeah, so in those cases, I mean, I think this is everyone in here. I've had people share something with me that, I mean, I don't even need to share with Megan, really, right? I mean, there are some of those cases where it's the information at hand is either something emotional or physical that's happened to them and could be highly explosive if
Even
it,
if you think you were trying to help them by sharing their story,
yeah.
you're not helping them if you don't ask for their permission before you share.
Yeah, and what's best in those cases, usually because Megan's the closest person to me, is for me to say to that person, is it okay if I talk this over with Megan or get their permission on it? Drew?
We've got to be honest with ourselves about motivation as well, right?
Mhm.
I mean, especially in the southeastern corner of the United States, how many times have we all in this room heard gossip couched with the phrase, bless their heart, or even something that can be guised in like religiosity. I don't know if that's a word. Of
It can be.
hey, I really want you to be praying about this because so and so is going through this, and
Yeah.
like we use that as like the vessel to drop something that we just want to share. Right?
Yeah.
And so like we've got to be honest with ourselves about why and how we're sharing,
Yeah.
and if it is beneficial, and then it's all those things that Hillary just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is how we justify
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, all of the words at play under the umbrella of gossip, right? I think that one that maybe we use, again, not that these are it, we're going to talk about how we justify it here in just a second. Not that we use all of these, but I was reading, I was going through all of these, and I think James 4:11 is one that is maybe a little more appropriate to the one of the words that's in the umbrella of gossip that we use the most. It says, "Don't speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother, or what's that next word? Judges, right? Is that not maybe a lot more of our language as far as how it feels when I find out that Nick and Missy were talking bad about me? I take it as though they are doing what? They are judging me. Okay. Not only are they judging me, but in most cases, they've condemned me for whatever it is that I'm doing and what it is that I've done. And so I think that we need to take very seriously, we talked about this, giving common courtesy to all. And I think, hate to keep saying I think, but this is one of those, just like telling the truth, right? That because we all do it, it tends to get very, I don't know, like not in the category of it's not a big deal. Okay? And I think for the case of what we're looking at this morning, it needs to be magnified. Like this is a big deal because you're going to see it is all over Scripture, this very thing that we should not do. So let me jump to what Drew said and talk about this. I think that maybe this is kind of a piece of where you were going. So as far as how we justify gossip, more times than not, what'd you say, Drew? Bless their heart.
Or I just really want you to be praying about this, Jen, because
Okay. Yeah, we lead in with something that sounds really good, that opens the door or softens the blow of what it is that I'm about to say. Now, I think that, you know, this is probably the biggest one, right? Is that it's not gossip if it's true. And so how might you rebuttal that? How might you say, well, that shouldn't be a justification for gossip. Hillary?
Like Delia said, it could be true, but they didn't want it repeated.
Yeah.
They didn't want it told to other people, so it's still under that umbrella of gossip.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it could be, now, pay attention here, saying bad things or negative things. Does that mean that it's true or that it's false? It doesn't matter which way. Might I say something true about Nick that is bad, but doesn't need to be shared? That's the place that we're getting to, right? All right, and then the other part, well, are there any other rebuttals? Go ahead, Stacy.
Well, I would say that, there's different versions of the truth,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like, lost my train of thought.
Okay, well, no, I mean, anybody want to bounce that off and try to fill it in? Go ahead, Amber.
There's always three sides to every story.
Yeah.
My side, your side, and the truth. A lot of
Sometimes
times-
more than three.
So,
But
yeah,
go ahead.
sometimes more than three. But the truth really, most of the time takes from both sides of the story
Yeah.
because everybody's typically apt to twisting and, bending some of the facts of what happened to aid their thought or their understanding or their position of whatever happened.
Yeah,
So it's really understanding, what side of this truth are you hearing and what all of it is factual.
sure. Christina?
I think it's also important to keep in mind, everybody has a different perception of the truth.
Right.
So it's not that I might be telling you something that I think in my head is completely 100% factual,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the way I understood it versus somebody
Right.
else might understand it
Yeah.
a different way. So it's not that we're trying to twist or turn the story on purpose, but I think that's part of it. And if it has nothing to do with you or doesn't affect your daily life,
Yeah,
maybe just think it to yourself.
right, yeah.
You know?
Nick?
I think it goes back to intent though.
Yep.
If we're talking about not sharing somebody's story, but I'm sharing it with somebody who's dealt with this, and my intent is to help them. Sometimes people don't want help. As a man, we're always like, oh, I can fix this myself. I got this.
Fine.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way.
Right.
I mean, sometimes you do need help. So if your
Yeah.
intent is to help somebody without them wanting to share your story, I still think you need to help that person.
Right. Yeah, I in my mind, I'm not gonna read through all this. My mind immediately went to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Did the Chaldeans say anything untrue about these three guys as far as bowing down and worshiping King Nebuchadnezzar's statue? Not at all. Entirely true. Everything that they said that you see there on the screen is true. But what was their intent in sharing this with the king? To get these three guys thrown right into the fire, right? That's the intent behind why they do it. I think that's a really valuable word, and Chris brought it up before. So before we talk about, I guess maybe why we gossip, let me close off this really lengthy intro with this. Number one, it's not good, and it is a problem. And we all have a problem, but what's even more clear is that the world has a problem in what we're talking about right here. Because it can absolutely destroy a family, it can destroy a church, it can destroy friendships, some of which we'll talk about in a minute. But I've been doing a lot of reading on statistics and churches and why people don't go to church and stuff like that. Did you know one of the number one reasons that keeps people out of the church or going to church is because they are deathly afraid of being judged, of what people are going to say about them when they show up. That should say everything we need to know as God's people about what the perception is sometimes when it relates back to gossip or any of these other terms that we use. So number two, just because gossip is sometimes hard to distinguish from all these other layers, we can't ever say it's okay, right? Now, the other part of this, we're talking about our home. Now, what are our feelings about what I say and what I do in my home? It's my house. I got the freedom to say and to do whatever I want. So you go right on ahead. But if we're saying that Jesus is Lord and we are people of the book, then it is not a situation where I can say, I get to say whatever I want in my house and talk about whoever I want. We're doing what he did. He's the one that has to influence what goes on in the home, what I'm talking about, what my intent is, and all those things. So are you about to say something?
I was just thinking, and that's all well and good if you have enough self-control, I guess, to only say those things in your home.
Yeah.
But if you have two 8-year-olds that are also hearing those things in your home, just be prepared for those to leave your home.
Mm. I have nothing to say. What's really scary is that I don't know. I know I'm gonna try not to pinpoint because she may or may not be in here. But one of my sisters used to say that she had a little birdie all the time. Why are you laughing, Camden? No, I'm not trying to. Some of our kids, when we start to talk and talk about other people, they get in the habit. I'm not saying telling you this is the result of you. I'm just saying that sometimes they start to want to hear the juicy gossip, right? And so they're looking for that. Camden, so quit, okay? No.
And not only are they looking, like there are certain kids who are always tuned in, but there are also people whose personalities are such, may or may not be somebody who also lives in my home, but has a problem with moving past negative things they hear about people. Like
Yeah.
for some people, I consider myself a very forgiving person. So
Mhm.
you could have just cursed me out and I will probably talk to you tomorrow. Like
Mhm.
that's just me. I'm okay with that. But for some people, they can't, like every time they see that person, they're gonna think this thing for years.
Yeah.
Like it could have been 10 years in the past, and they're still thinking of it every time they see this person. And so I realize that's one reason.
Mhm.
Again, talking about our kids and it's individual to our kids, like
Right.
because one of them it doesn't matter, but the other one might hold that. So you just have to. That's another thing about our kids. And
Yeah.
be careful.
Yeah,
I
how they-
regret some of the things that we probably talked about in front of them, for that reason, not realizing at the time that might be something that's gonna hold there for the next 10 years.
Well, that's all of us, right? I mean, who can sit here and say you aren't in the same boat as Sunny with what she just said right there, right? And so, again, I just want to remind you, we're just in the business here of trying to, I don't know, raise the awareness and do a little bit better than we were before, right? Now, as you look at maybe why we gossip, I think that this is also important to understand, like what are the soft spots when gossip shows up, what is the cause of why I'm talking about other people when they're not there? So before I give you some of my list and what I think, what are some of the reasons why we get ourselves into a situation that we would label gossip? What are the factors at play? What's the why behind why we do it? Besides the first question and just our fascination, I guess.
To bond with other people.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big one. Does that one take you back to middle school? Okay, so I know that if I share what I know about Drew with this group over here, I'm sharing something juicy, and now I got some buddies, I got some friends, and it forms a little bit of a bond, right? What else, or why else? Go ahead, Casey.
Some people use gossip as a way to seek attention too.
Okay. Yeah.
A way to seek somebody's attention or approval.
Right. And more times than not, we would label what they're saying as a rumor, if that's the intent, them trying to seek attention. What else? Anything else?
you're ready, get a sense of feeling like your situation's maybe a little bit better than theirs. And
Yeah, it's that relative goodness factor, right? That if I'm talking about someone else and they're not there, it's pretty easy to compare myself to them and say, I'm the good guy, right? So let me give you a few, and most of all of these are scriptural. And actually, if you want to turn to 1 Timothy 5, I want you to see that we may not do this with all of them, but I want you to see how, what we see in our Bible is like a motivating factor behind getting you to the place where we would call it gossip. Now, in some cases, it's nothing more than laziness. As in, I don't know that laziness is the right word, maybe idleness or idle hands, just from the standpoint that I've got nothing else better to talk about. So because I don't have enough business in my life, I'm going to talk about your business, right? And that's how that works out. Now, before we read this, I want you to know, women, don't get offended. I'm not just talking about women, and I don't think that Paul is bringing this up as a means to knock down women. I just want you to see how maybe Paul had some kind of an experience or situation with a woman who became idle, wasn't doing a whole lot, and it turned into this place of gossip. All right. So 1 Timothy chapter 5, beginning in verse 9. A widow is to be put on the list only if she is not less than 60 years old, having been the wife of one man, having a reputation for good works, and if she has brought up children, if she has shown hospitality to strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, and if she assisted those in distress, and if she has devoted to every good work, but refused to put younger widows on the list. For when they feel sensual desires in disregard of Christ, they want to get married, thus incurring condemnation because they have set aside their previous pledge. At the same time, they also learn to be, here's the word, idle as they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things not proper to mention. Now, again, I think that could be all of us. The more idle I am, the less I have to do, the more the push is going to be to talk about or to make myself busy in your business. All right. There's another one up there, 2 Thessalonians. I'm not going to read that one, but I think what makes it the most hard is that's what we are inundated with from the outside. Right? You turn on your TV, and if it's someone talking, they're usually talking about someone else. If I listen to a podcast or like we're just inundated with it. When you check out of the grocery store, what are all the magazines that are lined up right there? Big, fat, juicy gossip and stories, right? Some of it factual, some of it not. Here's the next one, is how it's in connection with being envious or being jealous of others. So what does that sound like? What does that sound like when jealousy or envy is the motivating factor in me talking about someone that's not there face to face?
Well, they only have that because.
Okay. Yeah, and it's usually led in with something like that, and it's typically very subtle. I didn't know if anyone would be able to give examples, so I highlighted a part of this. Here's some examples of maybe what it sounds like. He asked the question, what does jealous gossip sound like? I know Bob has a lot of money, but he just wastes it on fancy stuff. When we went to his house, did you see how many TVs he has? And why does he need a house that big? Well, what is the motivating factor there? Well, I'm envious of that guy's money. She just prances around because she wants everybody to see how beautiful she is. He thinks he's hot stuff, but his kids are out of control. So you see how those two things kind of work in line. He's a terrible boss. I don't know what they were thinking by promoting him. Everybody hates him. So you see some of these motivating factors in how we get to this place where we're saying something bad without that person in our presence. Here's an easy one, is when we're hurt, right? I'll tell you what's very easy. Eric says something bad about me. Well, buddy, I'm not coming right back at you. But guess where I'm going to go? I'm going to go set the forest aflame with all of you. Guess what Eric did to me? And so when I am hurt, then that's where I go. Now, what's interesting here is most of us are pretty like, I don't know, maybe you aren't, but typically we like to suffer in silence, right? So if Eric comes at me, the way we handle that usually is that I'm going to suffer that by myself. I'm not going to approach Eric. I'm not going to go to Eric. I'm not going to have a face-to-face. And that's what leads to the forest setting of flame, right? We saw some of this in our Bible reading this week. If you read through the Sermon on the Mount, anything in there about this one? You hurt me, I hurt you right back, or you hurt me with your words and I go out and I gossip about you, right? No, what does Jesus say? If someone does bad to you, someone slaps you and turn the other cheek. Someone asks you to walk 1 mile, how far should you go? I'm going to go 2 with you, all right? And that's hard to do. It's hard to do, but that's what we're getting at. 1 Peter 3:9 was a good one there. And then the last one here is just fun. I thought this verse was, I never paid attention to this. The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body. Again, I mean, we can go back to the beginning. Our fascination with this, sometimes it's just downright fun. I like to do it, and it's entertaining. So let me stop right there. Anything you want to add to those?
I like the, one thing that kind of covers all of those is we forget that it can change the perception that of a person has of the person we're gossiping about.
Yeah.
If you tell me a secret about Nick, or Nick, if you tell me a secret about Nick, and that changes my perception of Nick, all he's done is, been there being a good dude, but all of a sudden I don't like him.
Yeah.
And he has no idea.
Yeah.
And maybe the rumor's not true, but I've changed my perception of him. Or allowed my perception to be changed, and that's just, he's just, innocent bystander.
He's chopped liver for no reason. Yeah, because it's someone else.
And it's,
Yeah.
and it's all fabricated, or,
So let me take what you're saying right there, Ryan, and let's apply that to our kids, right? So Drew, just last week or the week before, you were talking about how you were able to go to all these people that have been in your life here at this church, right? You mentioned some names. So what starts to happen? I'm just going to use myself as an example. What happens if you are talking about me and your kids hear what you're saying bad about me? What starts to happen in the eyes of your kids? Is it not the same thing? Right? So the very minute they hear something bad, well, they're, without even being involved in the conversation, their perception of me has changed in that instance. And I'm not there to defend it, right? So that's scary. So let me make this next part brief. We talked about some of what it does, but here's some from the Proverbs that talks about what it does, right? So it separates close friends, right? So like, I don't even need to hear what it is someone's about to say. If Brandon comes up to me and he says, "Did you hear what Davis said about you?" That's all he needs to say for the damage to be done as it relates to my relationship with Davis. I don't even need to hear what he said. The very fact that he's talking behind my back about me makes that relationship strained, right? The next one, it creates anger. I mean, does anyone in here like being talked bad about? So my initial response is, I can't believe they would do that. I'm gonna get back at them, all those things. And then finally, the friction and the fire and the drama in relationships. So, not sure where you're at in all of this, but, now let's talk about in the last few minutes, how do we combat that in the home? How do we create an atmosphere of like anti-gossip in the home? You give me some of your stuff and then I'll show you some things I've put together. Go ahead, Sonny.
Real quickly, because I'm about to walk out, but,
Something else.
one time I was really upset about something in the church, like a person. And, I was talking to Melissa Boyles, and I thought like she was on my team. I used air quotes. We were alone, and I was just like saying these things about how I had been hurt or felt hurt and all these things. And it is like, I can still say that this is like one time in my life, she absolutely stopped that conversation. It slightly awkward, but like awkward for me because I'm the talker and whatever, but like, I vividly remember that she shut that down and she redirected that conversation to talk about something else. And it is the one time, like I can't think of many others in my life where it was the perfect example of how that should be done in a Christian way. Like, you are talking to me about this, and I thought this was like me and her having this conversation, and this was the perfect opportunity for me to share this with her. And she didn't say, we're not going to talk about this, but she just said, I'm so sorry you feel that way. And it was a full redirection. I'm not going to participate.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Back to what Christina said. Sometimes we do it to like create a bond, and we think that the bond is going to come from what it is that we're trying to say. But when someone shuts it down, how much more of a bond have you formed through that person saying, hey, I'm not going to engage in this right now? I mean, what happened to your level of respect?
I mean, she was already,
Oh, I know.
List, but like this made her perfection.
And so she couldn't go any higher. Go ahead.
See, if that person can talk about somebody else, just imagine they could be thinking about you.
That's right. Yeah. Bingo.
I think
Which
to
is
go back,
also scary. Go ahead.
to go back to connecting it to like your home, there are times that, and I think we just have to be over mindful because we have young ears. They don't know what might just be information or something that him and I have to talk about that isn't gossip, but talking through something or, sharing new information about something that we need to know. Like there are things that aren't gossip, but an 8-year-old, my 7-year-old does not know the difference.
They can't diagnose that.
They can't diagnose that. And it goes back to one of our earlier lessons about, truth at what age and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
My kids don't even know those things. They don't understand what might be going on, and they don't need to know that. So we have to be very careful because she'll pretend like she's not listening, but she is. And we have to watch like names we use. Like a lot of times our conversations are like, we connect. And so we know we're talking about the same person, but then they don't know who we're talking about.
Right.
So that those things aren't changing perceptions of people or things like that.
She thinks I know what she's talking
about.
You're just going like this.
That's right.
Yeah. Christina, were you going to say something?
Just off of what Sunny was saying, I think part of the bonding, what I was saying, is getting validation about your feelings about a situation. So instead of just letting it sit with you and taking whatever comfort.
Which I think in some cases, I'm going to talk to Megan about someone else, so I know, hey, are my feelings valid before I go in? Hopefully my motive is good. But I think maybe that fits in that disclaimer scenario. Eric, were you going to say something?
I was gonna say, we talked about little ears, and Megan just kind of mentioned it as well, but in our house, we kind of joke around about it. We could be yelling and screaming their names to come and do something.
Yeah.
And they don't come, acting like they don't hear, and then as soon as we try to have any kind of a adult conversation,
they're in. Well,
That's what happens with little ears around.
yeah. Let me share this with you here in our last minute or so. I think like everything we've talked about, I mean, it's got to start with me. I can tell Megan all day long, you got to do better, you got to do better. But it's not, nothing's going to change if I don't start with me. So I think part of that maybe goes back to some of the questions that Hillary was talking about with her mom. Does it need to be said? Is it the truth? What are my motives in talking about it? Asking hold on questions. So I think, you know, part of this too is sometimes we're sharing something and we're magnifying it, making it really big. And what I really need is for someone to step in and say, hold on, haven't you done the same thing? Like, why are you making this such a big deal? You've done the very same thing. Thirdly, face to face. We have an example of Paul in Galatians 2 opposing Peter to his face. I think that's a great example. He didn't go out and talk about it. He didn't go, you know, run his mouth about that situation. He opposed him to his face. Number 4, push back with some understanding. That one's mainly with our kids. They come home with some juicy gossip and we kind of push back, but we play the side of the person that they're talking about so as to kind of keep it at bay. And then number 5, find something to compliment. That's more or less something, I mean, Megan and I try to do. Sometimes it's good to let girls vent, I think. No? Okay. Sometimes it's good to let girls vent and to get out what they need to say, but ultimately at the end, redirect it back. Okay, you got to say something positive about this person. Give them a compliment. They're not here, but say something good. And then finally, refuse to participate. All right, we're out of time, actually 1 minute over. Thank you guys for being here, and have a great day.